And Bill, if you could take the CD down. Thank you. Well, here we are again, approaching the end of August, I don't know, they say that the older you get, the faster time goes. Is that true? I mean, I'm the youngin' here. It's starting to appear that way more and more to me. Um, but it's a good thing, I think. Where we're heading is a happy destination if we are doing this work consistently with a deep commitment, right? And so, this idea that the work will speed up our evolution. We talked about that last week, yes? So this arc of evolution where we're going from human stages and ranges of perception into more angelic and heightened states of awareness of the divine self. And the more we are willing to have that process of spiritual evolution have its way, do its work, as he says in A Course in Miracles, strong wills can speed this up dramatically. What would have taken you 1,000 years, he says, in A Course in Miracles, can be done in hours. And so this is the idea of being conscious and awake and aware of who we are and what we are about here, right? The idea of being about our Father's business kind of a thing, this process of awakening. And, when we are in this stage of early development of being a spiritual being, having a human experience, we definitely need guidance, yes? Like this is kind of like, we're in school and we are in the early grades according to the bigger picture of being in this schoolroom. And the school will then provide us with the curriculum and the lessons, and kind of this is where we're going this morning, that we need maps, right? As the statement always goes, the map is not the territory, but we need maps. And what we're going to be talking about this morning, at some point, we'll integrate it nicely, is that the myths and the religions, our wisdom traditions, provide these maps of consciousness. The great pioneers, the cosmonauts, the psychonauts, they've gone before us, they've mapped this territory. Joseph Campbell, who we'll be looking at this morning, he wrote a book very influential, A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he's kind of getting at this archetypal hero myth, this monomyth, as he calls it, that in all of these traditions, you have Buddha, Zoroaster, you have Christ, you have Lao Tzu, you have all of these great luminaries and avatars and saints and sages, and they seem to follow a deep structure of awakening, how they start out, the challenges that they face, the processes that they undergo, and then the grand awakening or enlightenment experience can be mapped. And that's what Campbell does in that famous book of his, A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And so, as he says in that book, and as we're going to be kind of plotting our trail this morning, we're that hero, right? So this is something Campbell likes to bring out in his work, that you're every character in the story. So that when you're reading these deep myths, these myths of transformation, your psyche, your consciousness is taking a multitude of different forms. You are the devil, you are the angel, you are the savior, you are the ignorant rabble. That all of these elements and energies and propensities are within us. Heaven and hell are within us. And so this is an inward journey, but we're not aware of the scope of who we are. There was a book entitled, it was a subtitle of a book I read long ago. He says, it's all in your head. You just don't know how big your head is. And this is what we're really getting at, that your consciousness is the space in which the universe is arising. And so everything that's arising within the space of your consciousness is a reflection of you, whether conscious or unconscious. And so the goal is to become totally awake, right? Buddha means awake. And so you're aware of this. You're aware that you're actually looking at reflections of yourself. Another metaphor that's very useful in mapping this very subtle process is the idea of dream. We talk about dream a lot. And when you go to sleep at night and you're dreaming, you're generating the landscape, you're generating the people, you're making things out of your own mental or psychic energy. These are all offshoots or outcroppings of your own mental energy. So as Jesus tells us in A Course in Miracles, you go from sleeping dreams to waking dreams. Your whole life is spent in dreaming. And so even here and now, we are the dreamer, and we are conjuring this space within our consciousness, and everything that we're interacting with are our mental energies. And so the awakening process is to become aware of this seamless fabric of consciousness, this non-dual being that we are. We're all experiencing it from different nodal points within this fabric of non-duality. So it appears to be distinct. And in one sense, it is. And so the virus of ego can isolate this center of consciousness and make it distorted enough so that you think you're here and everything else is there and it's not you. The awakening process is to dissolve those walls of false separation and realize this is all a seamless garment of consciousness, and you are that, tattvamasi, right? And so this is, where we need maps for this. This is a hero's journey. It's heroic. It's not something that you can take lightly, and it will test you, it will push you, it will bring you to the brink of insanity at times, it will bring you to your knees, it will crack the ego open. And that's a necessary thing, because the ego's got to come down. But oftentimes we're gripped, we're white-knuckling, we're attached to being this ego. And as those walls begin to come down and those false personas that we've been hiding behind are exposed, it could be quite traumatic. And so one of the things that the maps help us do is become less and less attached to the mask, so that we can take more of that position of the witnessing consciousness, that the ego is an object in our awareness. We're not that, right? In the unawakened or dream state, we become the dream figure of the ego. We forget we're the dreamer. And so we're so bought into the dream, and we're seeing it only at the level of the dream. We don't realize we're the space in which everything is arising. We are the child of God. We are a co-creator. And so this process is going to really test our limits, and then we're going to exceed our limits. We're going to manifest potentials we never knew we had, but they're always ours. It's a natural state that we're returning to. It's just been dormant, right? And now we are in this process of speeding it up. So there, the end meets the beginning. So to kind of wet our whistle this morning, we're going to begin with some of these teachings that come from Lao Tzu, one of the great master sages. And this is the Tao Te Ching, often associated with Lao Tzu. And one of the things that we want to point out early on in our discussion this morning is when we think about our awakening process, like we've been saying, we're often under the mistaken understanding that it's me, John, that's getting awakened, that I'm an isolated entity, and I'm going to wake up, and you guys might not, and things might not change out there, but John's going to get what John wants, right? If John wants to wake up, John will wake up. What we're saying is, remember, John is a distortion. John is this idea that he's separate from everything and everyone else. That's suffering. That's being asleep. And so that state of ignorance will go away through this awakening process. But when John goes away, I awaken as the self. And so I am the individual, but I'm also individuals. I am a solitary being, and I am society. You like that? So Lao Tzu makes that a very um, major point in his teaching on the Tao Te Ching, that the master is also an influencer, if I can use that word in a positive way now. It's been sort of co-opted in unpleasant forms. But the master is actually also the ruler of society, right? So you'll see how this all plays out as we get going on his teachings here. So here's priority number one, according to Lao Tzu. Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. And so really important to get this watching, this calming, this emptying of the mind. Allows us to have a perspective on life that is truly enlightened, because it's not being caught up in the drama of the latest thing, what's going on, good or bad. We actually step away from it. We detach. We witness. This is what meditation is designed to do. Meditation is the laboratory in which you're cultivating this quiet, empty, watchful awareness. And as you do this, you're not only going to see the turmoil of beings out there, your family members, your friends, people that you're driving past, people on TV in war zones. Like, you're going to watch that. You're going to look deeply into it. You're not going to ignore it, deny it in that sense, but you're also going to know that they too will return to the quiet. As all rivers come to the sea, all beings return to their source. And so that's inevitable. Now, as we have said, you can speed that up or you can slow that down. Some beings are in the business right now of slowing it down and really buying into the drama and making more drama. But you watch that too, dispassionately. You don't allow that to pull you into the dream. You keep remembering you're the dreamer. And a lot of the times when these beings are in your view and you're triggered by it or bought into it, quickly turn your watchfulness, your mindfulness onto what's being triggered and why. Because this is oftentimes how we have these invisible hooks or cords that are connecting us to certain family members or relationship dynamics, and we get taken out of our empty mind and our watchful awareness because these are parts of us that are wounded and need to be looked at, that need to be healed, that need to be made aware of and shined away. So when you're getting hooked on something, that's a light on the dashboard. It's not out there that's causing it. It's something in here that I am ignorant of, ignoring, not looking at. So let me empty my mind and look at it calmly. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you, and when death comes, you're ready. So this notion of watching the mind, letting go of your inner turmoil, knowing that the outer turmoil will eventually subside and return to its source, all of that has us relaxing the grip that we all have on our mask, on this body identity. And when you're able to let go of being the mask, the false persona, as the Sufis say, you die before you die. You're no longer the mask. You're not an image. You're the awareness. You're one with Tao. You're awake. What you are, I don't know. Who could say? But I'm here, I'm awake, and I know this deep within my heart. And so what is death to one who is eternally awake? It's just taking off one garment and putting on another. There's nothing that really dies. I heard it recently by a medical doctor, believe it or not, who had said that we have the second law of thermodynamics and physics, right? That energy never dies, it just changes form. Well, doesn't that go for everything then? That your awareness is part of this energetic fabric that never dies? It just changes form? And when we begin this process of awakening, like we said, we actually can return to the formless source and get out of the dream entirely of thinking we are a form. Be free of any limitation, any separation, any distinction. So this is a really important element on the map. Empty your mind, observe yourself, contemplate the turmoil of beings, but know that their return is inevitable. They will find out who they are. And by us anchoring and harnessing this awareness, right, and really being so steeped in it, committed to it, and weeding our garden of all the pests and obstacles and choking climbers and vines that we can release, our presence begins to be this transmission that accelerates other beings awakening. That's why we're here. This is part of that Gnostic myth that we're going to be talking about on Wednesdays coming up, that in Gnosticism, which is what we're talking about here in the Tao Te Ching and the Gurdjieff teachings, and what we're going to see coming from Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung. And Gnosticism is the golden thread that goes through all of these sacred traditions. It's knowing yourself. And also the one who is the knowing one is the awakened one. It's the hero with 1,000 faces. So you literally, as it says in Zen, when speaking about Bodhidharma, who was the first patriarch of Zen in China, that the great Chinese masters used to say, when you come to know yourself in this Zen mind, you will be looking out through the same eyeball as Bodhidharma. In other words, no difference, no separation. What Bodhidharma sees, you see. Because you're not the image, you're not the body. You've let go of the persona. Who are you? Well, that's what the maps are designed to have us turn in and discover. Now, this is kind of the societal dimension that the Lao Tzu brings in. Because when beings are not anchoring themselves in this awakened awareness, then they are prey to external forces, right? So when you're not aware of who you are, and you know this, and you know your source, then you're being the false ego. And the false ego has this view that everything that's external is bigger and controls it. It's asleep. And therefore, these other energies in the world and people and events and situations can take the ego and move it around the chessboard in any way that these happenstance energies determine, right? So the ego is a victim of the world it sees. It's set adrift on this sea of forces. So that's when Lao Tzu says, when the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. Right? So no longer do you have the gnosis, you don't have the knowing. Now you're going through the masquerade. I'll be a good person in the dream. I'll be a pious person. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. right? But you're a character in the dream. You're not awake. You're good. You're a good dream figure. You're a spiritual dream figure. But you're a figure. Yeah? And then he says, when the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth. So what Lao Tzu is saying is that there's this deep wisdom in the body. And in Zen, we've used this example before. They tell the story of the millipede walking with all of those legs moving. And the frog is looking at the millipede going by, and he goes, I just got one question. How do you know which leg to put in front of the next? And when the millipede hears that, he begins to think about it and he trips. And this is what Lao Tzu is saying. When the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and worldly knowledge step forward. And so it's artificial, it's synthetic, it's inauthentic. You could see it. If you have any kind of a radar to authenticity, you could see that it's now you're clever, you're intellectual, you're erudite, you're talking about things you've never experienced, but you can use high-flown language and quote all of the great texts and teachers and scholars who have said this or that. Very clever, right? But never having tasted water, and yet you're an expert on water. Then he says, when there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. So when we don't recognize this great harmony that unites all beings together in this one true self, and you're amongst your family members, then we do things out of guilt and obligation. And we get into these really twisted dynamics of, well, I have to because she's my sister, and I'll take my brother's side because he's my brother, even though he's totally wrong here, but I'm going to go to bat for him. And so we do these things out of filial piety or filial piety. And so this is, again, inauthentic living. This is losing sight with the source. And then finally, he says, when a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born, right? So when we are all about, God bless America. Like, well, Lisa and I see these bumper stickers sometimes, and God isn't supposed to bless every country, just America? Just America? And we've seen this throughout history. You have one side praying to the Christian God to kill the other side that's praying to the Christian God to kill that side. And so this is, again, losing awareness of the source, really losing this deep nature of self-knowledge, where all beings are you. All beings come from the same source. Countries, that's a synthetic idea, right? And so when you're caught in patriotism or party politics, you are living an inauthentic life, and maybe you don't know it. Because you're dividing your consciousness into an us versus them paradigm. You have your reasons and your rationalizations, and of course they're good, right? As the good dream figure. You stand on the side of good, whereas they over there, they're not good. And you don't realize they're you. That's you. That's your unconscious block showing up, your shadow. So what these myths are designed to do, as Jung had really expertly unpacked, was they are to integrate your psyche. It's to make the unconscious conscious. Your enemy is your shadow. And you have to look at yourself in the form or face of that enemy and realize these are my denied parts. These are aspects of myself that I refuse to own. And so I can't deal with the cognitive dissonance of thinking of myself like this. So clever ego disassociates and displaces all of that shite onto somebody else. Now you can attack them because they're not you. That dream figure is bad. This dream figure is good. You see? Country falls into chaos like that. We lose the sense of the Tao. We're asleep. The Great Way is easy, yet people prefer the side paths. Be aware when things are out of balance. Stay centered within the Tao. How do we do this? Empty the mind. Watch. Be aware. You're not the ego. You're watching the ego. You're not your name or form. That's an object arising within your awareness. You're not your story. Those are things that happened to the name and form. You go to a depth that is, up until then, the undiscovered. Right? So again, Carl Jung pointed something out in his Memory, Dreams, and Reflections, his semi-autobiography. And what he had recognized from an early age, as he calls it, is personality number 1 and personality number 2. According to Jung, personality number 1 was the surface personality, the worldly self, the self that knew how to, operate within at the level of the world and be identified as the, modern person and whatever that entails. Personality number 2, according to Jung, was what he termed the ancient self, the self that's been around for a long time. Right? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna early on in the 2nd chapter, he says, look at this battlefield. We've talked about this. Everyone here has never ceased to exist, nor at some point in the future will they ever die. They're an eternal living entity. And as Krishna tells Arjuna, they put on and take off bodies like clothes. So there is an aspect within the psyche that is ancient, right? Timeless. Jesus talks a lot about this ancient self or ancient name in A Course in Miracles. Our disease in this era, set adrift without an orienting myth, is that we have become completely encapsulated, if not corralled, into personalities number 1. We are just the surface dweller. We live in a flat land. The ancient self is undiscovered self. We don't know it. And so that's again what these orienting myths are designed to do. Take you on the hero's journey. Well, what is the hero's journey? Well, you start out as personality number 1, Harry Potter, Luke Skywalker, Jesus, Gautama the Buddha. You start out living in the world, a prince, a hillbilly up in Nazareth, the kid living at his aunt and uncle's under the stairs, right? Harry Potter. Neo, Mr. Anderson, the computer programmer. These are all the monomyth of the personality number 1 starting out in obscurity, totally identified in the world as the body self. What happens in the hero's journey? Well, something occurs where there's a shock, there's a crisis, there's a problem, and the personality number 1 can't fix it. Arjuna's on the battlefield. He can't fix the crisis. He breaks down. What's he do? He cries out. And what happens? This otherworldly presence comes. Dumbledore, Krishna, Morpheus. These otherworldly personalities come, and they have gnosis. They have self-knowledge. And so personality number 1 starts to crack, and he's given this knowledge. What is the matrix? It's all around you. It's there when you wake up in the morning, when you pay your taxes, when you go to church, right? the matrix has you. You're asleep, and you don't know it. You think this is the real world. So the Hierophant, right, the master teacher, comes from behind the veil and gives the gnosis. Personality number one starts his journey. Well, then what happens to the hero? Well, the hero goes through the dark forest. You begin to question every value you have. Family starts to break down. I was living out of guilt. My filial piety was all inauthentic. I was living a completely inauthentic life. My marriage is inauthentic. My relationship to my mother is inauthentic. I'm inauthentic. That's very difficult. It's a dark forest. And you begin to meet. First, maybe as Jung would say, you're meeting your shadow, you're meeting your dark side. You're starting to see how you projected all of your guilt and blame on the world. That's got to come back to roost. This is all part of waking up. You got to see that you're the one self, disassociating. And so as the shadow comes home and you start to look, you begin to integrate it. Well, what else comes? You begin to have a sense of your soul, that there's a light that is not of this world that begins to shine in your awareness, and it feels so much better than anything the world has ever offered you. And you want to go where this soul is. You know that soul is home. The world isn't home. And so you get to go into a deeper place within yourself. You're being guided inwardly. And you begin to now deal, as the hero's journey goes, with the denizens of the deep. Right? That you begin to work with these unconscious forces that are beyond the individual. They're societal. They're global. They're cosmic. And you begin to integrate as you overcome the impulses of the passions and the struggles of, wanting to run away and yet facing your fears. You begin to anchor into something deeper than the world, and that's ancient. You begin to come awake as personality number two, right? And you begin to see from a very different perspective who you are and who everyone else really is. Is this clear? To find the origin, trace back the manifestations. I'm in the wrong one. The great way is easy, yes, yet people prefer the side paths. Be aware when things are out of balance, stay centered within the Tao. All right, so before we move on with that, the great way is easy, yet people prefer the side paths. Not everyone wants the gnosis. Not everyone wants to wake up. As Jesus says in the gospel, the way that leads to life is narrow, and few find it. It's not that it's hidden. It's that few choose to be chosen, right? Because it does require a heroic, courageous disposition to question every value you hold, to allow things to actually be undone so that you can come to your authenticity. It can be quite scary, quite nerve-wracking, quite full of problems and uncertainties that you don't know how you're going to get out of. And yet, as it says in the Sufi teachings, paradise is encircled by everything you don't want. Hell is encircled by everything you lust after. So the way to paradise seems to be bitter, but the end is so sweet. The way to hell seems to be so sweet and ends so bitter. So this is again the importance of maps, because they have you avoid future pain. They begin to show you these archetypal energies and how they operate. You have to learn how to navigate them, or you're going to be lost at sea. No stars in the sky to direct your course. That's what these teachings do. The great way is easy, but few people want to set out to sea. And then he gets into the social dimension of this. And this seems to be very much reading the tea leaves of our present time. When rich speculators prosper, while farmers lose their land, when government officials spend money on weapons instead of cures, when the upper class is extravagant and irresponsible while the poor have nowhere to turn, all this is robbery and chaos. It is not in keeping with the Tao. So again, you can see symptoms. When you're disconnected from the authenticity of true source, look at what happens to a society. Right? This is exactly what Bill Moyers in that conversation with Joseph Campbell had asked him. Right? We all know this by now, right? The PBS special that aired in 1987, The Power of Myth. It's worth looking at. So this is Bill Moyers. Now, Bill Moyers is a journalist. He's sitting down with Campbell, who is, at the time, the leading mythologist. And he says to Joseph Campbell, what happens when a society no longer embraces a powerful mythology? Campbell answers, what we've got on our hands. If you want to find out what it means to have a society without any rituals, read the New York Times. And Moyers says, and you'd find the news of the day, including destructive and violent acts by young people who don't know how to behave in a civilized society. Moyers, society has provided them no rituals by which they become members of the tribe, of the community. All children need to be twice born, Moyers goes on to say, to learn to function rationally in the present world, leaving childhood behind. I think of that passage in the first book of Corinthians. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, a mature person, I put away childish things. Then Campbell says, that's exactly it. That's the significance of the puberty rites. In primal societies, there are teeth knocked out. There are scarifications. There are circumcisions. There are all kinds of things done so you don't have your little baby body anymore. You're somebody else entirely. Now remember, that's taking the myth literal, right? Scarifications and forced circumcisions, which they do show clips of that in this PBS special. But the idea is what we were saying earlier, when personality number one has a crisis and you want to know who you are. That is your initiation. That is the circumcision of your heart. That's when you want to go beyond the veil and see who you really are. You're not personality number one. You're the ancient self. And so what's being said here is that we're living in a society that has even let go of the maps. We don't even believe the maps anymore. The maps are, passé, childish, quaint. They need to be updated, right? And this is one of the reasons why I'm building on this Gnostic theme and why I keep coming back to the Course, A Course in Miracles, because that is a modern day Gnostic revelation. It checks all the boxes of a Gnostic revelation when you know what Gnosticism, especially Christian Gnosticism, is. And what is the updated form? It's spiritual psychotherapy. That's what A Course in Miracles is. It's spiritual psychotherapy. What did Jung update the Gnostic and alchemical myth to look like? Psychology, depth psychology. So at our stage of evolution, we're going within, but we need maps to the psyche. We need to know how to navigate. What is ego? What do I do with the guilt in my relationships? How do I live an authentic life? Who am I? What's my relationship to my brother? This is all done through a very sophisticated psychology. When a society loses its moorings, then we have no way to navigate anything. It's whatever feels good, do it. And everything gets relegated to personality number one and body identity. That's why this push for DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion is all flatland. It's all dream. Because all we're doing is fixating on body. Right? We're ignoring depth. Right? And you can see that in Hollywood and the movies that are being put out, like updated Star Wars stories. Remember Star Wars, George Lucas? George Lucas, they actually sat in George Lucas's house to have this conversation. He was a student of Jung and Campbell, and he wove these archetypal themes and myths within his first 3 Star Wars. Let's not talk about the prequels. I don't want to go geeky on you. But what you're seeing now, when Disney bought Star Wars from Lucas, they've flatlanded the whole thing. It's now empowering women and inclusion and diversity and all of that. But it lacks depth. There's no substance. It's all political, ideological, propagandistic, right? And again, if you're feeling triggered here, you're being pulled. It's good. It's part of my job. You don't have to agree with me, but look at what I'm saying and see if it has any truth value. So our Hollywood is, designed in its authentic place to bring us into these archetypal experiences. When you sit in a movie theater and you're looking at Tolkien's Lord of the Rings or the early Star Wars or The Matrix or something, you're going through a catharsis of a hero's journey. You can actually imbibe some of that energy and direct your inner journey through the symbols on the screen. Now, that's been in many ways done away with, right? And now it's divisive and shallow. And that's what we're getting as a society. And he says, well then, what a myth is designed to do is take you into the deep mystery of yourself. He says it takes you into the deep mystery of yourself and everything else. So real inclusion, really equal, not at the body level, not at an ideological, synthetic, inauthentic level, deep inclusion, deep equality, real, right? Knowing, and transcends the body. You're not the body. That would be a paltry version of yourself, right? Again, this is what a myth is designed to do. It is a mysterium, a mystery. It's tremendous, and it can be horrific, Campbell says, because it smashes all of your fixed notions of things. True myth, true transformation. Smashes all your fixed notions of things, and at the same time, it utterly fascinates because it's of your own nature and being, right? Personality number one with its ideology and its worldview and all of these beliefs that it holds, gripped, white-knuckled, body identity. This is what's good. This is what's spiritual. This is what's true. Smashed. So that you can enter and know. And few want that. Few are willing to have their idols smashed because they think they need them. They stand for something. And that's horrific when you get your idols smashed and you don't know. Right? In Zen, Master Sengsan, he says you have to cultivate I don't know mind. That's how you can enter the mystery. I don't know, but I will know. I'm just not going to use number one, personality number one, to tell me what I know. That's going to be done away with. And then he says, so here's Moyers. He says, to me, that's the curse of modern society. The impotence, the ennui that people feel, the alienation of people from the world around them. Maybe we need some hero who will give voice to our deeper longing. And Campbell responds, that is exactly T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland that you are describing, a sociological stagnation of inauthentic lives, and lives that has, and living that has settled upon us, this inauthentic living, and that evokes nothing of our spiritual life, our potentialities, or even our physical courage, until, of course, maybe war ensues. But he's saying this is the losing of the Tao. Right? We get into a hopeless society. Ennui sets in. I mean, I'm sure you guys recognize, because you're committed to these teachings, that when you go to a store and you're looking in people's faces, like sometimes, I extend my peace, my light, my joy, and I'm met with total voidness. Like people are void oftentimes in my experience. Pardon me. But what I'm seeing in the society is this being checked out, this not really wanting to be here, right? Being numb. And that's what he's saying, this spiritual wasteland. So this idea of the hero is what's required, right? This is what's being evoked or invoked. And so ending with this, Campbell says, mythology is not a lie. Mythology is poetry. It is metaphorical. It has been well said that mythology is the penultimate truth. Penultimate because the ultimate can't be put into words. So a good myth, like A Course in Miracles, it says it takes you to the door. And then God takes the last step. You're then translated beyond thought and word into infinity, into true knowing or knowledge. But you need a myth, you need a curriculum, you need a map that can take you to the door. So every map, albeit it's not the territory, it's a penultimate truth that Campbell is saying. So ultimate truth is beyond words, beyond images, beyond that bounding rim of the Buddhist wheel of becoming. Mythology pitches the mind beyond that rim to what can be known but not told. So this is the penultimate truth. It's important to live life with the experience and therefore the knowledge or gnosis of life's mystery and of your own mystery. This gives life a new radiance, a new harmony, a new splendor. Thinking in mythological terms helps to put you in accord with the inevitables of this vale of tears. You learn to recognize the positive values in what appear to be the negative moments and aspects of your life. The big question is whether you're going to be able to say a hearty yes to your adventure. Moyer says, the adventure of the hero? Campbell, yes, the adventure of the hero, the adventure of being alive. Will you say a hearty yes? Well, If you do, it could look like coming to class tomorrow night. Or joining us on Wednesday for the Gnostic class. And so what we're going to see when we go into these Gnostic teachings on Wednesday, we're going to start with Elaine Pagel's book, The Gnostic Gospels, but that's a springboard. We're going to be looking at the Nag Hammadi library, which is really the compendium of all these great Gnostic myths. But we're going to be looking at it, you can say, from a Jungian or psychological dimension, that you are the myth, and you are these energies and potentials and elements that you're seeing in the myths. You don't take them literally, they're metaphor. They're to bring you to the door of your own awakening. And as you grow in your knowledge or discerning, you'll see some myths are like, oh, okay, that was for a little while when I was cutting my teeth. No, I don't think those things anymore. Now, here's some more meaty myths, more direct myths, powerful myths that can further my journey inward. And then those will be discarded like old clothes. And you keep, donning and shedding these symbols, just like you do with bodies, until you get to a place where the mind has ripened. And then you can go beyond all symbols into the wordless, the thoughtless, right? The timeless. And you'll be able to acclimate to it because you've gone through the maturation process, the initiation process. You've gone through that evolutionary arc. And that's what the myths are designed to do, to guide us along that arc. All right, I'll shut the fire hose off for a moment. Just take a breath or two and settle in. And these triggering moments where we set in play these hidden forces and spiritual powers that begin to work in our life, that they're always initiated or triggered by a very subtle yes, or I'm ready, or bring it on, right? A courageous but a subtle yes. And so if we want to be free of suffering, if we want to be truly happy, if we want to know ourselves and to know the truth of all living things, we have to come to the still moment where we give this unequivocal invitation to the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit will show up in any form that will suit your needs and will begin to woo you into the grace of this self-knowledge. But the invitation must be unequivocal and sincere. So take a moment, if you haven't done that already. Say yes to the adventure of your life. Say yes to discovering who you truly are as this ancient self. Awake. So, to kind of bring it all together and present it in a bit of a different nuance, what we've been talking about is we are either asleep as the ego in the world, or we are on a path of awakening. When we are totally asleep as the body ego, We are prey to the forces of history and politics and economics and illness, and all of these things can seem to control us. We are the victim of these external forces. When we begin this path of awakening, we have this second birth. And this inner self, this ancient self, begins to become our center of gravity, our anchoring point, our true identity. And its energies and presence has the ability to trump and override external forces, to actually alchemize them, right? To reintegrate and transmute them from poison to medicine. So your challenges become your gateways to freedom. Your demons and enemies become your teachers and guides. This is what the ancient self will do. Totally alchemize, transmute the base material into the golden experience. This is within you, ready to hatch. And so the incubation period of allowing this ancient self to predominate in our awareness is what we've been talking about. When we are not on that journey, as we've said, we are, according to Gurdjieff, he doesn't call it a dream figure, he calls it a machine. Right? So the dream figure, right, when you don't know you're the dreamer, and the dream figure is who you think you are, you're a mechanized, unconscious machine. Right? You're not awake. You're asleep. And this is a little bit on this notion of being the machine. He says, all the people you see, all the people you know, all the people you may get to know are machines, actual machines, working solely under the power of external influences. Machines they are born, and machines they die. Right? Few want the way. It's not that they're being forced to this life. They choose it. They choose to be asleep. This is one thing that begins to become abundantly clear. Right? How do savages and intellectuals come into this, even now at this very moment while we are talking? Several millions of machines are trying to annihilate one another. What is the difference between them? Where are the savages and where are the intellectuals? They are all alike. But there is a possibility of ceasing to be a machine. It is of this we must think, and not about the different kinds of machines that exist. This is back to that false DEI, right? Again, I don't want to, ruffle any feathers here, but that's talking about machines at that level. And the true equality, the true inclusion is to be awake and see the real self that is not the machine. Of course there are different machines. A motor car is a machine, a gramophone is a machine, and a gun is a machine. But what of it? It is the same thing. They are all machines. And then his student asks, can one stop being a machine? Here's Gurdjieff's answer. That is the question. Right? If you had asked such questions more often, we might perhaps have got somewhere in our talks. It's possible to stop being a machine, but for that, it is necessary, first of all, to know the machine. A machine, a real machine, does not know itself and cannot know itself. When a machine knows itself, it is then no longer a machine, at least, not such a machine as it was before. It already begins to be responsible for its actions. Back to where we started. Empty the mind. Allow all of your values to be clearly contemplated and examined, and let go of the false persona, your surface mask, your body identity, and sink deeper into yourself and calm and be watchful. Watch the machine. The machine is not just your body. The machine is your mind that is asleep, thinking it's the body. Watch. Be watchful and pray. Don't go to sleep. Stay aware. And don't get sucked into the wasteland of ideology and propaganda. Recognize it for what it is. Blue bag's going to go around. Any follow-up questions, comments? Beyond right and wrong. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where the thought of other is laughable. Yeah. Blessing the offering, charging it with the intention that in whatever form or whatever name, it is a trigger to the great awakening, and so it is. Amen. All right, my friends, let's seal the deal. Rising and resting within that calm and watchful heart, where the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. All right. Have a great day. Much love. Thank you so much for being here.